Star Wars is back on the big screen with The Mandalorian and Grogu.
Gangsters, war criminals. I'll take out every bad guy in your deck of cards.
On May 22nd, feel the Force on the biggest screen possible.
The old protect the young, and the young protect the old. This is the way.
Buckle up.
Always wear your seatbelt.
The Mandalorian and Grogu. Rated PG-13. May be inappropriate for children under 13. In theaters May 22nd. Get tickets now.
The new LinkedIn Hiring Pro can't undo your last hire. The lone wolf, who you thought was a good collaborator because you didn't have the right candidate insights. But once you hired them, it was all hoarding info, declining meetings, and howling at the full moon? But LinkedIn Hiring Pro can go deeper than just the resume to find you a perfect fit. By using insights from the LinkedIn network to give you a short list of best fit candidates. Hire right the first time with LinkedIn Hiring Pro. Post a free job today at linkedin.com/quality.
Welcome back to Marvelous Disney, the podcast where Dan Graney and I talk about Marvel, Disney, theme parks, movies, and those moments where the company quietly tells you who they think they are now. I'm entertainment writer Jim Hill, and I'm joined, as always, by Dan Graney, who's just back from an afternoon of thrifting, and we are recording this, on Sunday, April 26th. And Dan, it kind of feels like Marvel gave us a lot to chew on this week. But before we get to that, again, other than the thrifting, is there anything else exciting going on in the Graney household this week?
Oh, gosh. Let's see. The kids are in the final few weeks of school, so the house is abuzz with that. Mm-hmm. Paula is celebrating a birthday this week. And I'm juggling responsibilities while trying to figure out the best approach to getting the Jedi Master passes for Star Wars Celebration next year in LA. Yeah. Yes, I've heard that they sell out in seconds. So it's really more of like a fluke if it would ever happen. But other than that, many Marvel moments of note, a bunch of things that we've been talking about suddenly seem to be snapping into focus.
Yeah, I mean, because on the surface, it's a bunch of announcements. I mean, for example, we have Endgame coming back into theaters in September, right? And but with new footage. And then there's this Infinity Vision thing. But again, the more you look at all this stuff, the more it seems connected, right?
Oh, yeah, there's definitely a sense of coordination. And Jim, if I may be so bold, some might even call this assembled.
Well played, well played. All right, but before we dive into this week's news, let's take a moment to talk about our sponsor, which of course is unlockedmagic.com, where you get real discounts on Walt Disney World and Universal Orlando tickets, sometimes upwards of 12% off. And just so you know, Unlocked Magic is run by the exact same team behind the DVC rental store and the DVC resale market. So just pick your dates, grab your tickets, and go. Unlocked Magic makes it that easy to rack up some pretty significant savings. Oh, and when you get your tickets, tell the nice folks at unlockedmagic.com that it was Dan and it was Jim that sent you there, okay? All right. So let's talk about a couple of loose threads out there before we get to the big stuff. So you have seen the last couple of episodes of Daredevil Born Again, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I did. And again, I think for the spoiler sensitive, if you want to go ahead and jump a few minutes forward in this show, go ahead. Okay, so, something we talked about last time did actually come to pass, and although not without a great deal of drama and emotion, and I have to be honest, Jim, this was beautifully portrayed.
It was, and kudos to Vincent D'Onofrio and Eilert Zurer for bringing an incredible level of drama to the show.
Oh, yeah, I mean, for brutal characters. This was just incredibly graceful. But, you know, that wasn't all that happened.
Yeah, we got to see Jessica Jones again. Or you know, she made her entrance onto the Daredevil Born Again canvas, and she's now a mom.
Yeah, you know, I laughed because when we first saw her, she was not wearing her Jessica Jones uniform. She had just regular sweatpants and socks. I mean, that didn't last long, and eventually she was back in her uniform. But yes, she is a mom, and we have a pretty strong idea of who the father is.
Luke Cage, who may have had dealings with Mr. Charles.
Yes, seems to be. And that, you know, that parentage aligns with the comics, by the way. And we have a long way to go. But I do want to say that character of Danielle, they also call her Danny, obviously named after Danny Rand. Her character does end up carrying a shield.
Yeah. Okay. And speaking of other things that have sort of bubbled to the surface, again, this is kind of on the heels of CinemaCon, but we've got a rumor about Ned in the Spider-Man movie.
Yeah, I saw this and I don't love it. Or maybe I do. I don't know yet.
Okay, well, let's just say, okay, that it makes sense. Without spoiling anything, that he might have another career path after, you know, he wraps up his time at MIT.
Well, I mean, when you consider his inherent spell casting ability that we saw in No Way Home.
Yeah. You know, and again, I have to tell you, you know, this is still showing up every 5 minutes on you know, USA cable channels, you know, and I get sucked in every time. Dan, you know, just sort of, you know, blipping through and just, you know, still love that film. And now they're showing the extended version. And speaking of extended versions, moving to a bigger topic in this week's news, well, we start at the end, as in Avengers Endgame, which is coming back to theaters this September, but not as a re-release. They are adding new footage, and again, it was the Russo brothers themselves who said that it was, you know, we had to see this footage because it was critical for us to be able to understand Avengers Doomsday, right?
Yeah, and that word critical seems to be doing a lot of work, because it wasn't, oh, come on back and relive it. It was more of a, hey, you really might need to see this.
Which is fascinating, because we've spent years watching all these shows and films that were supposedly building to this, and while they had alluded to this, this firmly now says that Doomsday is a sequel to Endgame, right?
Yeah, and that's the part that really stood out to me, is Marvel saying, if you want to understand what's coming next, start here again.
All right. And I have to bring this up because I saw a theory floating around this week, and I swear you were circling this idea a while back, specifically about the sound at the end of Endgame that's been there, you know, after the credits since the film first arrived in theaters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the clanging, the hammer. I think I texted you in a tizzy with this idea that, you know, when they said that Endgame was going to be returning to the theaters.
And you know, not that it was anything at the time, but you were, you know, more excitedly playing your own version of What If.
Yeah, I think I mentioned that. You know, Marvel could go back and just reframe those moments. Now, I mean, I think the prevailing theory is, what if that moment, the clanging sound, it was just an audio device after the credits, but what if that actually becomes Doom forging his mask?
Jeez. Which has gained enough traction, that there was already a pretty vocal push against this idea, suggesting that it undermines the moment.
I know. I get this. I really do. But does it? I don't know. I mean, the Russos have a chance to weave these two movies and these phases together, and maybe it helps clean up the multiversal muckety-muck a little bit.
But, all right, to take things a step further, Joe Russo flat out stated that for the theatrical re-release of Avengers Endgame, there will be new footage in that film set in the Doomsday story that we have added to Avengers Endgame. And Martin Joy said, this is an opportunity to create a bridge between Endgame and Doomsday in a very unique way. And because that film was so successful, we have an opportunity to re-release it. And you don't always get the chance to re-release a film because it costs money. And the fact that we can enhance the story of Doomsday by bridging it to Endgame, and and these characters that we worked with for years, that we love so much, and continue their stories. Mr. Russo closed this out. It's a really unique opportunity.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this clearly goes beyond the simple, hey, see Endgame in the theaters and get a sneak peek at Doomsday at the end, and becomes more of this dynamic change. Now, it could be seamless. It could be a retcon. And yeah, it could change what those moments meant for people. I mean, but I think they're well aware that that's the line they're walking right now.
Which brings us to Doomsday itself. So again, we mentioned earlier in the show, CinemaCon, the big exhibitors event that was held in Vegas at Caesars, and the footage that was shared there, because we finally now have a better sense of what this movie is aiming to be.
Oh, yeah. Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans, they hit the stage to share the trailer twice. And while nothing is leaked or been shared, especially because there's all these night vision goggles and laser disruptors that were being deployed by security in the auditorium, we do have audience reactions. And the big takeaway for me was they're still not fully explaining the movie yet, and more selling the bigness, the enormity, and just how big it feels.
Yeah, I mean, from what we're hearing, it's Avengers, it's Endgame, it's huge scale, and of course, Dr. Doom.
And that's the big underlying message, that this is not only the next Thanos level threat. This is worse.
Yeah, and bringing back Robert Downey Jr. to play him, Dr. Doom, that's still one of the boldest choices, Marvel Studios has made. And we're now hearing the reasoning behind it, which is interesting because it's not just name recognition.
No, that's right. It is really about performance.
Yeah, and I have to admit, think about it. Dr. Doom is mostly behind a mask, and Iron Man kind of behind a mask, so that the acting has to come through in a different sort of way.
Yeah, and he has proven to be one of the few actors who can do that.
All true, and at the same time, we're also seeing who's coming along for the ride. Like Cassie Lang now is showing up again.
Oh yeah, that's right. She, Catherine Newton, she shared her own chair reveal, although it was a little tiny chair.
There we go.
Harking back to the infamous chair video that we still all talk about. Which not only offers that sort of we're not done introducing the characters yet moment, but also kind of felt to me appropriate in the approach to the idea of maybe a young Avengers, because they're leaning into social rather than a big dramatic reveal.
Excellent point. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break here, but when we come back, we're going to talk about what Marvel might be leaving behind and what that says about where they might be going.
Membership means more with American Express Business Gold. Earn 4 times membership rewards points in your top 2 eligible spending categories every month, including eligible U.S. advertising purchases and select media, and U.S. purchases at restaurants, including takeout and delivery. What are you waiting for? Get the card that flexes with your spending every month. Terms and points cap apply. Learn more at americanexpress.com/business-gold. Amex Business Gold Card. Built for business by American Express.
This episode is brought to you by Redfin. You're listening to a podcast, which means you're probably multitasking. Maybe even scrolling home listings on Redfin, saving homes without expecting to get them. But Redfin isn't just built for endless browsing. It's built to help you find and own a home. With agents who close twice as many deals, when you find the one, you've got a real shot at getting it. Get started at redfin.com. Own the dream.
Adobe Firefly is the all-in-one creative studio with AI-powered image and video editing for today's creative process. Built for creators of every kind, Firefly helps you generate, edit, and experiment fast. Because the asks aren't getting smaller, the budgets aren't getting bigger, and the timelines, oh yeah, still tight. With all the best creative AI models in one place, Firefly brings your ideas to life. Unlock a better way to make with Adobe Firefly.
And we're back. Okay, so here's where things get really interesting, at least for me, about how much we're hearing that Doomsday might actually pick up directly after Endgame. Because if that's true, doesn't that then mean that the last few years are suddenly not all that central to this story? Which... Dan, forgive me for asking this question, but what happens to everything else in the multiverse saga?
Well, it is kind of a fair point, especially when we went through so much of the explaining things like why were the Eternals here and never did anything, and now it's like, what Eternals? Don't worry about that. I mean, I don't know. I don't think it disappears, but it definitely feels like it's being de-emphasized. I think Marvel has to know they're under a bit of a microscope for this. So do they lean in and own it, or do they dodge it, or is this just going to be a Hail Mary that makes it all weave together seamlessly?
But at the same time, we're hearing about what's coming next, and Deadpool potentially kicking off the next phase, and X-Men being built as the long-term focus?
Yeah. And, it's kind of funny because you mentioning Deadpool, Ryan Reynolds himself said he's writing a 4th script, but he sees him as a supporting character and not so much the lead. Yeah. So, I mean, I think he's even having more conversations because it feels like Marvel is thinking in those layers again, where it's not just one storyline, but like multiple tracks.
But clearly, the focus right now is Avengers and X-Men, and everything else kind of seems to be orbiting that. But all right, but before we get to that, we should probably talk about something that's a little less flashy, but just as important, because this week, Disney announced lots of layoffs at the company, like 1,000 people, right?
Yeah, and this wasn't just in a general sense. These layoffs impacted the visual development team, the biz dev team, and that, that's not just a department, but that's the group that's been shaping how the MCU looks for almost 20 years.
Oh, God, yeah. I mean, these are the artists designing characters, costumes, environments, sometimes before there's even a finished script.
Exactly. They weren't really just executing ideas; they were creating them. There was a conversation that I saw, and one of the artists that was talking about it really stuck with me. Is they described doing keyframes, which were basically building moments that would inspire the movie itself. So they became almost a means of upstream storytelling.
And it's this visual development. I mean, again, something we've enjoyed about the Marvel films for years. But important to understand, Marvel has a very specific house style. I mean, even with different directors, different tones, but it still felt cohesive because of this look, right?
Oh, yeah. And according to some of these former team members, that cohesion came directly from having that group in-house. Same people, same sensibility. You know, they had a deep knowledge of the comics. I mean, they were like connective tissue.
They were. But I have to tell you, over the past week since this announcement has been made, friends at Marvel Studio have been reaching out, and because again, face it, there were lots of concern, online, and out in the entertainment community. But folks reached out and said, well, all right, yes, Andy Park was let go, but on the other hand, Ryan Mandarin, was kept on. So part of their classic visual development team is still there. But the other thing I was hearing, and forgive me, I know this is not going to make a lot of people happy, but the hard reality is we are now 40 films in to the MCU, and 15 some odd limited series over at Disney Plus. And the thinking is that, the Marvel house style is already established, and it would be teachable to AI.
I mean, it certainly might be cheaper, which I'm sure they want, but it might not be the same. I mean, you're now relying more on freelancers or project-to-project teams and AI, and I mean, it's all just such a different pipeline.
Oh, no, absolutely. But if you take the 30,000-foot view here, folks, the thing that's important to understand about this particular moment, here we are, late spring, early summer of 2026, is that, Disney just got themselves a new CEO, Josh D'Amaro. And, and Josh has to Josh has to placate Wall Street, because it's all about, what the Disney company stock is going for. And sometimes you have to send a message to Wall Street that you're being fiscally responsible. And so one of the ways you do that is you reduce headcount. And it's also worth noting that, for example, prior to the cuts that were made in visual development, we saw that massive cut in the marketing department. And that didn't just impact Marvel. That was Pixar. That was Lucas. That was feature animation, ABC, ESPN. And some of this is financial theater. Just the notion of you're doing something to make Wall Street happy, and then on the other side of that, you try to figure out how you're actually going to make this work. And to circle back to the notion of Marvel has a house style, and we now are in the age of AI, and the notion of you're looking to do a film further on down the line, and it's like you feed for example, Marvel bases a lot of its movies on classic comic books. So you feed that classic comic book into AI, and then you feed, think about it. We have had, MCU visual development art since 2007, 2008 with Iron Man and the Incredible Hulk. And so you take that source material, you take the art, and you can at least get a decent first pass as to what something might look like, and then then you bring in, as you mentioned, the freelancers and the remaining folks in visual development to tweak what's been created. Now, want to stress here from my conversations with folks at Disney that some of this is theoretical, because this is, face it, right now, Marvel Studios is concentrating on the two big dogs, and that is, Doomsday and then Secret Wars. Then on the other side of that, there will be other films. And this is where this will supposedly come in, post Secret Wars.
Yeah, and this is where it all gets a little murky. Some artists had, right off the bat, they said that they wouldn't be surprised if AI was part of the shift. And others said the plan is more about moving to freelance instead of full-time staff. And, what is it?
Well, you're not wrong. Me personally, I think it's a little from column A, a little from column B. If you take what they have previously done, and again, you were talking earlier in today's show about the value of that, even with different directors and telling different stories with different tones, it still looks like it's all part of one world. And that maybe this is a way to use AI tools and, as you mentioned, freelancers, a way to do this at a lower price point.
Well, and you think about this, it's kind of, this is what happens with technology. And we know other departments were already experimenting with AI tools, maybe not necessarily the core biz dev team, but adjacent groups. But it does kind of remind me of like when technology comes in, there is sort of this massive disruption. Obviously AI has massively disrupted many, many things. But part of this also reminds me of like when the volume came into being with Lucasfilm and they started using the volume. And first everybody was like, gee whiz, this is amazing. And then there was an immediate backlash against it. It's like, it's so fake. And it's like, I think what we're going to see now is this sort of leveling off. So while this may not be the actual reason, I think it's just part of the environment that that this decision is happening in.
I don't think you're wrong, Dan. In fact, for me, it was fascinating, to have folks coming out of CinemaCon who were talking about that 17 minutes of Mando and Grogu that was shown there, and have people actually talking about, the volume, and it just sort of like, this thing had a James Bond-like opening, a big action sequence to get you involved, and but the notion was that people were like, oh yeah, that they're standing in front of our screens. And anyway, back to what we were talking about earlier about this potential new production process. It sounds like, with that sort of reference material and using AI as a tool, you could get a pretty decent first pass. But then you really would have to hand it off to an actual human artist to tweak. But now, just the notion of, if we're taking into consideration that Disney has a new CEO and here's Marvel trying to, help Josh Tomorrow when it comes to Wall Street, and understanding that Lucasfilm was doing the same thing at Pixar in feature animation. This suddenly feels like less of an isolated decision and more of a broader shift, not just Marvel, but what's going on at Disney. More cost control, less in-house infrastructure. But at the same time, you look at how crazy big, they're going with Doomsday.
Oh yeah, on one hand we've got this massive increase in scale, but then on the other there's this sort of foundation that's changing, and I think that's probably a bit of the tension right now. Is Marvel is just trying to get back to what worked, but they're also changing how they build it, and that's the part audiences won't see. And the trick is, will they feel if it changes?
Yeah. And, well, right now, I think the best thing we can say is effectively watch the space. This is going on now, and let's see if it holds. But all right. And speaking of now we need to take another quick break because when we get back, Dan and I are then going to talk about how they're selling all of this Doomsday, Secret Wars, everything to audiences, which include something that Dan has very creatively dubbed
FOMO Vision.
FOMO Vision. But first, there's this.
Walmart Business is in the business of saving you time, money, and hassle. Whether your business started in a garage or is a garage, Walmart Business has the tools to help you get where you're going. Tools like free shipping, multi-user accounts, and just about any item your company needs.
Even a double filtration cyclone dust collector.
Yep, even that.
Sweet.
Walmart Business. It's the Walmart you love. Now for your business. Learn more at business.walmart.com. Terms apply.
Your favorite local grocery stores like Kroger, Ralph's, Fred Meyer, and more are now delivering on Uber Eats. Get 40% off your order of fresh, quality ingredients. Whether you just got home to an empty fridge or suddenly got a craving to whip up something new, you can get everything you need delivered in as little as 25 minutes. Get 40% off your order with code Kroger2026. Plus, members get $0 delivery fees. Order now on Uber Eats. Orders of $30 or more save up to $25. Ends 4/30/26. See app for details.
And we're back. So let's now talk about that other thing we heard about coming out of CinemaCon, which was Infinity Vision. Because the more I read about this, the more it feels like it just didn't appear out of nowhere.
No, I mean, we talked about it here, how Marvel lost those IMAX screens to Dune. And I think that's why we were like, are they going to change the date? Are they going to change the date? Well, obviously they weren't, because instead of competing directly, they've just kind of redefined the experience. Or so they say.
Yeah. So, and premium large format, that was what they were talking about at CinemaCon. That's where you make your big dough. So this is why Disney, again, when they talk about infinity screens, the language that's used is what? Largest screens, premium sound, certified theaters. And not to put too fine a point on it, Dan, but that all sounds very familiar.
Yes, it does. And I think that's kind of when it clicked for me, is that this isn't just Infinity Vision, it's FOMO Vision, because it's the fear of missing out vision. One, for, internally, I think Marvel, they're like, well, we don't have IMAX. What do we have? We have this. But then for the audience, it's also a way of saying, don't just go see the movie, go see it this way, or you're missing something, and it could just be Marvel's FOMO for IMAX.
Yeah. But the funny thing for me, and Dan and I are huge fans of Hollywood history, so you and I both recognize this isn't new, not even a little. I mean, this is like, Hollywood from the 50s, that playbook. I mean, when you go all the way back to guys like William Castle, he wasn't just selling movies back then. He was selling the experience.
Oh, yeah. Castle is famous for this. He had Percepto, which is where the seats would buzz during the Tingler. He had a Mergo, which we were talking about, where the skeleton would fly over the audience in House of on Haunted Hill. It wasn't really about the movie being better. It was just about you needing to be there to experience this.
And audiences did, in fact, show up for the William Castle movies.
Exactly, because it turned a movie into an event.
And if we then jump forward to the 70s, I mean, we then had Sense-Around, where you had movies like Earthquake, with the entire theater would rumble. Again, not the most subtle storytelling, but you had to be in a theater to feel this.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me of, if most people haven't seen it, there's actually a really great movie about this exact thing called Matinee. It's directed by Joe Dante. It's basically a love letter to this era. So, I mean, it's one thing to, if you haven't seen it, you got to look at this movie.
Oh, no. This has been a favorite of mine for years, largely because my friend Zane Yench is actually an extra in this thing. Zane is in, he sat in that, to explain, folks, John Goodman is playing a William Castle-like filmmaker, and the story's actually set during the Cuban Missile Crisis, right?
Oh, yeah. It's one of those films that didn't really have an audience at the time, but it works so well anytime. And John Goodman, and he's staging these over-top theater gimmicks, and, just to get the people in the seats, and it's funny. It is so prescient, and almost just feels like a blueprint for now.
Yeah. So now if we look at Infinity Vision,
the same instinct, different technology, same idea. You've got premium format branding, critical in-game footage, big screen exclusivity, all pointing to the same message.
And the message is you need to show up, and that's what makes it work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because at that point, it's not just about quality; it's FOMO vision. If you don't see this in theaters, if you don't see it this way, you're missing part of the story. And I mean, honestly, Jim, I don't even think that's a bad thing. It's very familiar. Hollywood's always found ways to turn movies into events, and this just feels like Marvel doing that again, just at a massive scale.
Now, so again, William Castle only with $1 billion budget.
Yeah, I mean, the difference is Castle, he had his skeleton flying around in the theater on a wire, and Marvel has the biggest franchise in the world, and maybe a few critical scenes added in, because nothing says don't miss this like rewriting a 7-year-old movie.
And forgive me for pointing out the obvious, but the original Endgame was already 3 hours and 15 minutes long, right?
Uh-huh.
So we're going to add scenes. Yes, it's gonna be longer. Okay. And by the way, I have to ask this, because again, all we're going on, when we started today's show, we were talking about, the info that had come out about Doomsday, the footage that had been shown at CinemaCon, and you talked about all the devices that were set off inside of the theater to prevent, a copy of this trailer, which was shown twice, from leaking out to the world. So if you were laying down smart money, when are we seeing this trailer?
I will say, ever since then, that's been the constant chatter, and there are rumors right now. There were rumors that it was supposed to come out today, the day we are recording this. So I think it's upon us. They were able to keep that footage from being recorded, and considering meta glasses and everything else that people have now, it's pretty impressive. But I think the more that footage just exists, the more it is either on a hard drive or in some physical format, the more it's shown, because I believe we've got another convention or event happening in Brazil. So with each passing day, obviously it gets closer, but with each passing day, the risk of it hitting unofficially increases. So I think it's going to be very soon.
Well, what's intriguing when you talk with folks at Disney Studio, that evidently there may be a minute-long thing that leaks out between now and then. but evidently the full bells and whistle trailer with everything in kind of a genuinely fiendish. Well, you remember the whole Meet Joe Black thing, right? Went. Okay, so
many people. The world, so many people bought tickets to that movie who never saw it.
There we go. That's exactly. They went to go see Phantom Menace, and the irony here is that evidently, it's going to be the Mandalorian Grogu. Is where if you want to see the full trailer with everything, you have to go to the Mandalorian and Grogu. There will be a taste that will get you all excited. And remember, that's May 22nd. So in theory, we're about 3 weeks out. And so, Disney's doing everything they evidently can to keep it locked down until that time. But the notion is, they'll at least get a giant opening weekend out of it, not just from the Star Wars fan, but for the Marvel fans who have to turn out to actually see the Doomsday trailer. So you got to give them at least that.
They're doing their part, and honestly, I'm doing my part. I don't know if I mentioned it, but I bought 10 tickets for opening day for my family. Well, an entire row of us will be there, hopefully watching this trailer.
That's so cool. All right. Well, anyway, until FOMO-vision hits a theater near you, well, folks, we can only wait and wonder what it is about Endgame that we're now going to have to go see, that new scene there. And before that, of course, again, we're, just desperately waiting for this Doomsday trailer to finally drop. But But beyond that, Dan, I think we should probably pack it in for, this week's episode on that point. So where can the nice folks find you?
You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, X, and most importantly, YouTube. Just look for the Hububbery. That's HUBBERY. In fact, we just posted a video for the Ramblery, which is exactly what that sounds like, where we just talk and go. And we just put a good portion of the Ramblery talking about you and the show, Jim. So everybody, be sure to check that out.
Oh, how cool! And speaking of shows, we got a couple of them here at Jim Hill Media. We got Disney Dish with Len Testa. That's our theme park news show. We have Fine Tuning with Drew Taylor. That's our animation news show. And then we have our epic Universal podcast. That's the one I do with Eric Hersey, who produces a lot of the shows here. And that, of course, is about the Universal parks. And then there's I Want That Too. And that's our Disney Merch podcast, which I do with Eric's lovely bride, Lauren. And as we wrap up here, folks, again, want to thank Eric as well as David Gray, who does a great job when it comes to the editing and production of these podcasts. And, got a quick favor to ask of you folks. If you could head on over to Apple Podcasts and post a review of the show, Marvelous Disney. That actually, I don't understand how the algorithm works, but evidently it helps the algorithm. And if you happen to mention the Hububbery, who am I to say? Let's see. Beyond that, social media-wise, you can find me on X and Instagram as Jim Hill Media. Then over at Facebook is Jim Hill Media News. And all right, well, on that point, want to thank you folks for once again listening to Marvelous Disney. And Mr. Graney and I will be back soon with even more news from the House of Marvel. But till then, take care.